Hello, Math 2 students. Today we're going to learn how to add, subtract, and multiply using complex numbers. Complex numbers are numbers that come in two parts. They're binomials. The first part is a real number part, and the second part is a pure imaginary number part. If we write a number with a real number part of 8 and a pure imaginary number part of 6i, don't forget to copy this table onto part number 2 of your notes. And we want to write that in standard form. It would be written 8 plus 6i, and it would be called an imaginary number because it has a real number part and a pure imaginary number part. In a second example, if we have a real number part of our complex number that's 0 and a pure imaginary part of our number that's 6i, when we put those together, that would just be written this way, 6i, and that is just called a pure imaginary number. That's what you call a complex number that doesn't have a real number part. And finally, if we have a real number part of 8 and an imaginary number part of 0, that would be written this way. And since this number does not have a pure imaginary number part to it, it is just called a real number. On this problem, we're going to add two imaginary numbers. Don't forget to write these 4 examples on part number 4 of your notes. To add imaginary numbers, you just add the like terms. The like terms are the real number parts, 5 and 7, and the other pair of like terms are the pure imaginary number parts, negative 8i and positive 4i. So if we combine this and that, we'll have the sum of these two imaginary numbers. 5 plus 7 is 12, and negative 8i plus 4i is negative 4i. And our imaginary number is in standard form with the real part in the front and the pure imaginary part in the back. Since we have a real number part and a pure imaginary number part, this number is called an imaginary number. On this problem, we're subtracting two imaginary numbers. 12 is a like term, it's a real number, and the other like term is 3. 4i is a pure imaginary number, and it's a like term with 4i, which is another pure imaginary number. The difference between adding and subtracting is we were adding this and that. Now we're combining this and the opposite of that. So the first step on this problem is to rewrite it as 12 plus 4i minus 3 minus 4i. So the negative sign affects everything in the parentheses to the right of it. We're combining this and the opposite of that. Now our like terms, our real number terms are 12 and negative 3, which is 9, and 4i and negative 4i, which is 0. So we have a real number part to our difference, and we do not have a pure imaginary number part to our difference. So our answer is just a real number. On this problem, we're multiplying two imaginary numbers, and since each imaginary number is a binomial, we're going to multiply by using the FOIL method. When we multiply the first term in each binomial, 8 times 2 is 16. When we multiply the outer two terms, 8 times 3i is 24i. When we multiply the inner two terms, negative 5i and 2, that's negative 10i. And when we multiply negative 5i times 3i, our last terms, we get negative 15i squared. Now when we simplify these 4 terms that we just got by foiling, we'll have the product of these two imaginary numbers. So we have 16, and then our pure imaginary parts, 24i and negative 10i, make positive 14i. And our last part, negative 15i squared, is negative 15 times negative 1. I squared, it's undone. Now the value's negative 1. So we have 16 plus 14i, and then negative 15 times negative 1 is positive 15. So when we put the 16, which is a real number, together with the 15, which is a real number, our final answer will be 31 plus 14i. And since our product has a real number part and a pure imaginary part, our solution is an imaginary number. Now we have the problem negative 16 plus the quantity 5 minus 3i squared minus 16i. We have to make sure that we do this problem in the correct order of operations. So our first thing would be to do the math problems inside of the parentheses, but since the 5 and the negative 3i aren't like terms, we can't add or subtract those. The next thing after doing the math problems inside the parentheses is to do the exponents. So we're going to have to take care of the exponents now. We have a binomial squared, so I'm going to rewrite the problem so that it looks like this. Negative 16 plus 5 minus 3i times 5 minus 3i minus 16i. Now we're going to have to take those two binomials and we're going to have to square them by using FOIL. So our firsts are 5 and 5, which is 25. Our outer terms are 5 and negative 3i, which makes negative 15i. Our inners are negative 3i and 5, which makes negative 15i. And our lasts are negative 3i and negative 3i, which makes positive 9i squared. So now when we simplify, we have our 16, which is negative 16, plus 25 minus 30i plus 9 times negative 1. I squared, it's undone. Now the value's negative 1 minus 16i. I'll have negative 16 plus 25 minus 30i minus 9 minus 16i. And so when we put all of the real number parts together, negative 16 plus 25 minus 9, that will give us a total of 0. So all of the real number parts add up to 0. When I add the imaginary, pure imaginary number parts, negative 30i and negative 16i, that will give me negative 46i. And that is the answer to our problem. So we do not have a real number part. So this problem just has a pure imaginary number part. So our solution or our answer is a pure imaginary number. I hope this video helped you understand how to add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers. When you're adding, just add this and that. When you're subtracting, add this and the opposite of that. And when you're multiplying, make sure you use FOIL to multiply a binomial times a binomial. I squared, it's undone. Now the value's negative 1.